it's a good looking class today.
I don't know. He gets to be nice because he's going to just intro and leave.
We went to Vegas for the weekend, so I. Oh, yeah.
I'll tee you up.
Thank you.
So before we start, we should actually get some warnings out. You're going to see parts of the forest collapse. They're going to die out, entire sections. I've seen this about 20 years ago, this exact same event. It's warm, moisture, and entire neighborhoods lost every pinyon pine. Whole groves of ponderosas died. I don't know if you paid to have a tree removed lately, but it's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose your trees. So what I'm telling my friends, treat them. And here's what to do. So 20 years ago, you could look at neighborhoods and they survived if the tree was near a lawn, they were feeding off the flower beds, they were getting some moisture from around. But we don't have lawns anymore. We don't have flower beds. So now I think the loss will be even greater in neighborhoods. And so we're seeing pinyon pines scale out now. They're actively moving across the yard and laying eggs. So if you look at your trees and get little white egg, looks like cotton balls, black spots in it, that's scaled. You should be very worried. If you look at your ponderosa pines, don't even look. You should just be worried. You're going to have bark beetle. And so you see pinholes in the bark kind of stuff. So if you've got any kind of really just pines, now 20 years ago, we actually saw it migrate over to spruce trees and some other evergreens. It was so bad. It was terrible. So I'd say if you have conifers, really worry and care for them. Here's what to do. Fertilize with the all-purpose plant food. This is like magic stuff for evergreens. So you sprinkle it around the base of the tree. It'll pick it up. It'll eventually get moisture, rain, irrigation will pick it up. Okay, do that.
Water right after you put it down.
It doesn't matter. Just get it on the ground. So these plants are going to start waking up. They haven't quite started pushing or elongating yet, but they're about to. When they do, they'll be real hungry. This will help them, especially pinyon pines or the pinions, will really benefit because they get kind of thin and wispy because the scale literally sucks the life out of them. So do this.
How much do you use for those big trees?
So how much, I don't know. It's a lot. But really what I'll do is I'll take my hand spreader, and I've already done mine. I just walk around the base. I'm thinking the drip line, the outer branches, which, they got roots going everywhere. Just get some out there. It's probably more than you think. But don't look at the base. Focus on the branches. That's where the feet are roots out. Just get some out there. Look, salt and pepper roots out. It'll go through the rock. It'll go through the fabric. It'll go through over the mulch. It'll go around the roses. It'll go around, fertilize the things around those trees. They'll pick it up. So just get some out there. Water the trees right now once a month. Don't overdo it with your natives. So I see some folks swing too far, they overwater. But it's been dry for a long time. So if you just go down to True Value or Cal Ranch, get a soaker hose, put it out there, turn it on. That's probably enough. And then come back until the monsoons come. We got our driest, windiest months through June. That's a long time. So, and then if they're being attacked, it's an easy target. If we hydrate them, they can actually take care of themselves. So food, water, and then what I'm doing with mine, tree and shrub drench. This is the greatest stuff ever. Or it's like an antibiotic for trees. And anyone can do it. You do not need to be an arborist. You can do this yourself. So all you do is you measure around the trunk, the circumference. If it's a big boy, it might take a whole one. The smaller ones probably you get several trees out of a bottle. You measure how many inches, and that's how many ounces of this you need in your watering can. Then top it off with water. Super easy. And then you water this stuff in your watering can, traditional green 2-gallon watering can. Pour it right at the trunk where the trunk meets the ground, right there. So it's opposite. You use it differently than you do a fertilizer. You're thinking out here. This, you're thinking right at the trunk. and the plants will absorb that under the bark. It will carry it up to the structure of the tree, and then it will protect all the sap for the. So the pinyon pine scale actually pierces the needle, sucks the life out of it that way. Well, it protects that. The bark beetle are actually underneath the bark, actually tearing up that cambium layer. Just underneath the wood is where the fresh, new living tissue is. It will literally girdle the tree, and you won't know it's dead till the end of May. All of a sudden, it will go in a week. It will go from green to no needles. They're all dropping off instantaneously. You'll be coming in, predict what waves of people coming in. But Ken, what do I do now? Get a chainsaw. Hire someone to cut it down because there's no recovery. So really protect those. So I'm trying to get the word out because I've seen this before. And how often you do that? Oh, this you only do once. Do it now. This protects the tree for a year. And this is a better technology. So you're at Waters Garden Center. We're going to try to get the best, the better. You're going to do it yourself. You can afford to spend a couple extra bucks for the good stuff. So this is actually the newer technology. It actually protects the old wood, and as they elongate its new candle growth, it will also translocate into the newer plant material as well.
How long does it take to take effect?
It travels about a foot a day. Just think, so it could take a couple weeks to get to a bigger tree. It could take some time. So this weekend, you do it now. Don't wait. So just kind of let you know. Okay? Yeah. Sign of scale, and I can look at it and just know, but I've seen thousands of cases. Close up look. Just look at a needle. If you see, look like someone took a number 2 pencil and drew it on the needles. Each one of those dots is a scale, and they can have thousands of them. And what will happen is the scale will actually take all the life force out of that plant. The plant literally starves to death because it doesn't have enough needles left. So when it gets damaged, you'll see it looks thin and wispy. A pinyon pine should look tropical, should look thick, lush. That's a healthy one. A wispy one is thin, you can see through it. That's probably got scale. And you're going to do this annually. If you've got a beautiful grove of native plants, you're probably doing this every spring. Just get used to it. So, or you can hire someone, pay $1,200 and have someone spray it for you. That works too. But you don't have. You can do it yourself with a couple bottles of this. You don't have to be sophisticated. Yeah.
And that's on any pine, not just the one you're.
I would do all my pine tree. I'm doing all my pines, just because I'm fearing for them. So I'm worried. I'm actually worried. I think the fire danger is going to be extreme this year because things are so dry, and so really keep things cleaned up, trimmed up. Even around the nursery, no weeds are allowed. We're just going to make sure the firefighters can keep that fire on the ground. Don't let it jump up into we've trimmed up all of our ponderosas. So there's no limbs, no dry limbs coming down. We're trying to preventative thing. So I'm just I've got a lot on the stake, a lot on the line here. And so do you. So yeah. I don't know that maples need it so much. You can, yes. But maples have different things that go after them, like thrip. So it can be effective with thrip. So thrip came out, you sipping your coffee outside in the morning, you see little flying things around at sunset or sunrise. Those are thrip. And they're going into your flowers. So what they're doing, they're going to get into your roses. Your roses you should fertilize with rose food with systemic. But that's not today's class. We can go deep on that. This is about Kevin Michaels, who's one of my foremost designers, horticulturalists, just a smart, good-looking dude.
Thank you.
Yes. So
Hard act to follow.
So he's teaching our class today, and hang out a little bit longer because we got a pollinator class, so butterflies, bees, that kind of stuff. I want to tee him up and let him go and not take another moment of your time. So,
well, I'm not watching the clock. She tells me when to stop. So,
okay.
All right.
Give it up for Kevin.
Thank you, Ken. So just a little bit to make you feel comfortable about who I am and what I'm doing here. When I first moved up here 8 years or so ago, I introduced myself to Ken and we started working together and helping him with the classes and with consults. The goal is because we put so much energy into having everything here that will grow here, to give you a level of competency and confidence that you're not going to find you just can't find in any other nursery in the United States. Ken is in the industry. He's very competitive, and he wants to make sure that we can supply things that you just can't buy. And that would be through our crew and through these classes and stuff. I want to kind of.
Need to probably hand this out.
Okay, yes.
So we've got a couple handouts for you when we're all done with this. In fact, I just did a whole series of Firewise handouts. I'm glad to share that with you as well. It's just on Congress, the website. So if you want that, put your email down. And if you can, really take a moment and write clearly so I can interpret what you're handwriting.
Yes.
And then if you're part of our garden club already, it's not going to all everyone. It's only going to you. So you got to put your name down on that if you would like it.
And I want to dovetail a little bit with what Ken was saying about sort of open or preventive. The sap inside of your conifers is the front line of defense for the boring insects. In a healthy world, they're boring in and they're getting suffocated by the sap. And when you don't have the moisture, that stops. The bug wins because there isn't any sap in the tree. So do please feed and water everything now. The other thing that is a more of a broad reaching, and it lends itself more to what we do here. 60 years of waters with family members still here every day, very vested in your successful gardening. And I came from Texas, and when I did, I moved up here about 8 or 9 years ago, but I lived in the Valley for 15 years before that, the Valley being Phoenix. I didn't understand the soil. So I had been gardening my whole life, and I went to ASU and I got my Master Gardener certification primarily for the encyclopedia of the soil science. Having said that, I still want to go and do homework online and figure out how am I going to grow this sage or Mahonia the best way that I can. Because, my cousin in California and Oregon, he grew them and they were just fabulous. So I'm going to call him, or I'm going to find out who grows Mahonia and ask him. The danger in that is that you come in here and you buy something that we have selected that will grow well here with the proper care and amendment to the soil. And then you get advice from someone in Pennsylvania or Oregon, and you blend the two, and then you come back and say, Kevin, I did what you told me and it didn't work. And so if you have questions, read the labels and ask somebody. We're really stern on not making things up. If we don't know, we're going to find out, and we're going to tell you we don't know. But the reality is that you can't blend them. We have a very unique system or ecology up here in the soil, atmosphere, and all that stuff. So you have to be very careful when you read a label. And this goes into what we're talking about today. When you read a label about you want to plant something in the yard and it says full sun, and it's a Monrovia product, which is a great grower of ours. Well, if it's grown on the West Coast, on any coast, you're at sea level, and then you have this atmosphere of refraction of the radiation from all the humidity. It's kind of a dome along the seashore anywhere in the United States. So your full sun is not full sun. You're 5,000 feet from Earth to the sun doesn't seem like a lot, but a big difference, but it really is, especially because you don't have that atmosphere interference here. You've got direct radiation. You take something that is grown on the coast, it says full sun, you put it out in your front yard, even though it's cooler here, it's drier and more direct sun, it'll just get crispy on you. And so that's a problem. So I want to start with the roots so that anything that you grow, whether you're working on your garden, like here, flowers, or you want to grow your veggies, you really work on the roots. A happy roots, happy fruit, right? You're going to get more of everything out of it, whether your fruit is your flowers or growth or something that's edible. If you're making the soil for a flower bed or a bag dirt, then there's not a lot that you have to add as far as acid is concerned, because the soil is already pH proper out of the bag, especially ours. But you still have a problem with your hose. The water is out of balance. And so the mulch creates an acid that will help offset that. And if you have problems, bring in a leaf or something like that, and we'll take a look at it. I really, whether it's on sale or not, I'm prone to sales. I like everybody else. I don't want to buy something that is already got fertilizer in it, you know, the pre-mixed bags, because you're going to be chasing problems, especially with vegetables, that you will have a hard time solving because you don't know how much is being eaten by the plants already. It's really hard to measure. It's better to get ours. If you were to buy our bed mix, if you were to do an analysis on it, it's probably 5.55, just because of the benefits, the nutrients that we put into it. But it doesn't have a chemical petroleum byproduct to bring up the nitrogen or whatever. You know, you'll see that on the bags where it displays the chemicals. Be very careful with that. Blossom end rot's really common up here, and it's any of your nightshades and your squashes, your tomatoes and your peppers and things like that. And the solution for that is calcium. And almost immediate uptake is our calcium nitrate. And you sprinkle it around the plant, your fruit will be sweeter, but it will also knock out that blossom end rot. It's not going to fix the one that already has it. It'll just keep everybody, it'll stop it, and then it'll keep everything else from getting it. I bring it up because calcium nitrate, as it breaks down, becomes nitrogen. And if you've got a bag of fertilizer that's already got 10 on nitrogen, to solve your problem, what you've done is you've given your tomatoes a killer dose of nitrogen. They'll grow like crazy and forget to bloom. So you'll have these huge tomato plants without any fruit on them. Now, that's one of the reasons why I just kind of eschew or stay away from the bags that already have stuff in it. It makes it harder for us to help you when we're chasing a problem. Phosphate is kind of, it gets a bad rap because, oh, you gave it a lot of phosphate to cause it to bloom. Well, phosphate is the nursery rhyme-esque, to simplify the numbers on your bag: up, down, all around. That's the 3 numbers. And down is your phosphate, your center number. Pardon me, I have suffering from the allergies, and I've been working in the yard already. In this world, you see everything is in bloom. It looks really pretty. In the grow house, as you bring everything, all the plants to a particular size, we call it pushing. Every drop of water that comes to these plants is going to have a little bit of food in it, a little bit of fertilizer in it. And when the plant gets to a particular size and they want it to sell, it sells better when it's in bloom. They push or up the phosphate in the plant, and that causes it to bloom. Well, you don't have to wait to do that. On your trees, for example, I feed phosphate in the fall, because the only time the roots can work for themselves is when they're not supporting all these flowers and everything. So when your tree is dormant, you want to feed its roots, get the flower out. You will use it for flowers, but look at this. This is an example. You see the bottom of this, just the solid roots? That's what the phosphate does. And imagine that in the ground in your yard, how healthy your plants are going to be if you get their roots to explode. They're going to be healthier. They're going to last longer. They're more disease resistant. You're going to get more flowers, more fruit, more leaf out of them. The other thing that I want you to be aware of, when you're feeding, you want to feed the bed, especially if you're doing flowers and stuff. Feeding an individual is great, and it's appropriate for our flower power when you want to keep something blooming. But if you get the whole bed wet and you get the whole bed with food in it, then the roots can go everywhere pretty comfortably. And this is applicable to your yard as well, because you bought a house that had a yard in it, and now you're finding things that are struggling. And there's a couple of things that are going on. When they planted it, they put a spigot here, with one little flag spigot on it that puts out however many gallons an hour. And this side of the plant looks kind of weak. So every once in a while you go out there and you deep water your plant. I would suggest that if you haven't, and you'll see this revive. Or what you can do is get your landscaper or yourself to just get a little tea and put a spigot on either side and test those, because just the calcium in the water will cause them to clog up. So every once in a while, I like the little round spigots that you can dial. You know, you can go 0 to 5 or 5 to 10, but you can increase. As the plant grows, it needs more water, and you want it farther away from the plant. You don't want the original one. So that might be something that you suffer with in your yard, but it's also, think of that when you have a bed, you know, water the whole bed as opposed to just the individual plants. We bring in some beautiful hanging baskets right now. They're stunning. And what will happen is, because of this pushing technique, you will you'll take it home and hang it up and water it when it starts to sag, and take pretty good care of it. And then what will happen is, in short order, you won't have near the number of flowers, and it'll be a nice, really big green plant. The plant might not suffer that much, but you won't have near the flowers. Well, what you've done is you've taken it from an environment where it gets a little bit of fertilizer every time it gets watered. And for our water and out of our spigots, we water with a well that we have on property, and we add fertilizer to it. So you're taking it home and you're just putting spigot water on it. That's real light soil, so you're rinsing it out, and at the same time the plant is eating it. So after you take something home, a basket or the flowers themselves, if it's just for flowers, and again, look at this, is 12 on nitrogen, 48 on phosphate, and 6 on potash. So you want to start with this about 2 weeks after you take it home, and you can go light. I always throttle back. I'm very leery about burning, because once you burn, you can't turn that burnt leaf green again. It's gone. So after you take home, especially these hanging baskets and some of the really big color right now, you want to start feeding them right away. And but it doesn't have to be every watering. You can do it. Periodically, like once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. That's going to keep your flowers up. But also, in the fall, I will put phosphate on anything that's big. I buy a bag with the intent to empty it, so that I go around and I just put it underneath everything. I start breaking it down and have the wand, you know, with the rain head on it. I'll throw stuff around the base of whatever is in the yard, and I will water it in, so that anytime it rains or anytime my sprinkler goes off, it's taking it up. It's not so, the watering isn't so localized. The other problem that we have, if you can call it a problem, it's really more of an opportunity to improve your yard. We have in the yards, decomposed granite is essentially our soil. That's the sandy soil. And you know, from the news and from wherever else, that Yuma and all the South Coastal Plain area that we have grows a whole lot of our produce. How do you get so much out of such ugly soil? Well, it's full of nutrients, mostly minerals, that need to be released. And the way that they get released is through acid. And the acid that is used commercially is humic acid on the liquid form. Organically, it's in humate comes from your mulch being broken down. So all of these plants that are grown in pots are grown in mulch. And when you add a little bit of mulch, 1/3 mulch to 2/3 of the native soil, you're adding to the acid cycle there that will allow the nutrients in the soil to be broken down, and it will pH balance the plant so that it can take those up. And when that starts to falter, you want to add acid to your yard. So if it's not a brand new yard, then again, the phosphate in the fall and humic acid, I buy a bag of this about every 2 years, and I empty it. I just walk around and put it on everything. And what it'll do is it'll balance out the pH in the soil, and in the tree or shrub, you'll notice it will actually look like you fertilize. Your red tip petunias, if they come out and they're kind of pink or rusty as opposed to red, it's an acid deficiency. People first blush will be iron. People from other parts of the country will think they need to put iron on it. And people from other parts of the country, this is including myself. When I came from Texas, I had one home was in this enormous basin. I could dig a whole fence line for red tip petunias or pyracantha or whatever. I'd find 2 or 3 rocks of black, beautiful soil, pecan trees. And I moved up into the hill country and it was solid slabs of limestone, just very, very, an hour and a half with a pry bar to dig a hole. And it's just very, very different. We have that here, but the acid will help break apart your clays and it'll help to just balance out the pH and allow the nutrients in the soil to be taken up. Your plant will be healthier and the soil will be healthier. And the granular will actually keep you from clumping. So as a little segue, but one of the most common things across the United States would be the use of gypsum or sulfuric acid, sulfosoil, to break apart your clay and to green up your yard. Well, one of the reasons that works is when gypsum breaks down, it becomes sulfuric acid. And so I just go straight for the acid. The 2 common things that people struggle with or bring in most commonly and say, hey, what's wrong with my maple? What's wrong with my lawn? Because it just isn't as green or as vigorous as I want it to be. It's either acid or iron. Less likely iron, more likely acid. If you're not sure and you don't want to spend the time and the money buying one and then the other and trying to chase that, buy this. This is iron plus acid. And if you have a lawn, you'll be amazed at what this does for your lawn. And these are not so much on the nutrient side, like you would be giving them phosphate or nitrogen or something like that. This is just elements that your lawn and your plants could use. And I've had people come to me in jest and say, you cost me, we didn't buy a bunch of fertilizer and stuff like that. We just did the iron and acid, and I had to pay the guys twice because it took them so long to bag all the extra grass I had in my lawn, and so that you just try some of the simpler stuff first, or again, ask somebody. That's what we're here for. Do feed quarterly. One of the things that Ken didn't bring up about the formulas that they've created, once you add a mineral, they don't allow you to call it organic. But because you have a lot of things, including pollinators foraging on almost everything in your yard, getting sap or nectar off of a leaf on a plant that doesn't bloom, whatever it is, you want to be cognizant of what you put into the soil. And if you use a granular product that breaks down slower, then you get that little bit of longevity to that fertilization, as opposed to, it's as if you are having your own fertilizer in your drip, because every time you water, you're releasing a little bit of that. And that, as opposed to the granulars, as opposed to the powders that you're mixing, this is immediate uptake, but it doesn't really have much storage capacity in your ground. It'll save some of it in the mulch that's in your soil. And that brings me to another point that I want, especially with these older lawns. Everything looked great until this year, where we got some heat, or they just been on this slow decline, and this plant is supposed to last a long time. Well, without being able to go back and say maybe the landscapers or the loving parents of this property beforehand put too much mulch in the hole, that's highly likely. 1/3 mulch to 2/3 native soil. Remember that this is almost 100% mulch, this bucket. And there's no way to replace this mulch as it starts to break down by just leaving it out there. So in short order, and I mean 3 to 5 years, there's a whole lot of this mulch that gets broken down and used, or just loses a lot of its volume because it's doing what it's supposed to do and amending the soil around it. So you need to come back and replace some of that. And I don't advocate using a planting mix to do that. I'd buy like a topsoil, where the topsoil, again, we're kind of pushing the elements of what things are designed for. This iron plus acid is predominantly for lawns, but because it has the two elements in it that are very good for your shrubs and trees, if you get the right acid balance, your maples are going to be greener. They're going to be more red in the fall. It just builds on itself, how much it helps it. When your mulch breaks down, you end up with air pockets in the soil, and that causes, dry rot, which is affecting your roots. It's not able to hold the water, which affects your watering cycle and how the plant responds. The plants that are growing up here, they need that sandy soil to give them that blanket, that insulation for winter and for summer both. So what I'll do is I'll buy a topsoil, which is made to level out holes in your yard if you have a lawn, because it's got mostly sand with the finer, dustier parts of the mulch. And I'll take a plant that's a little beleaguered, and I'll get my 744, pour a little around it, pour a bag of topsoil on it, and take the hose, and you will see a lot of the topsoil just disappear down in the soil. And what that is a sand filling in air pockets that are created by the mulch breaking down. And the whole plant, the whole will hold the moisture better. The other thing that I want you to be, since we're talking about how to bring back some of the older stuff in your yard, I was at a house the other day, they have black plastic, and that's a timeline that was used as a weed cover. Some of you may have that, that was pre-grass cloth, and they would put the black plastic down. When you peel that back, you will see the roots. This happens with the grass cloth as well. You'll see the roots sitting right up underneath there. Two things are happening. One, you're not watering deep enough. You probably, we'll get there in a second, but deeper water less frequently is much healthier for the plant than shallow water all the time. But these roots are catching the condensation that's happening atmospherically underneath the black plastic. And so they're sitting right on ground level, and they're not working with the drip system that you have in place. Likely there's this, so you have black plastic and maybe one plug on a tree that's planted 10 years ago. So you want to get underneath that tree, break some of your stone back, cut some of the plastic away from the trunk. If you're not going to redo the whole yard, pull up the black plastic. You can do it a trunk at a time. Buy a bunch of the little round spigots for your drip system, and just have them in your pocket. And when you see a flag that you didn't put on it, it's been there too long, trade it out. You can open it up to 5, or you throttle it down to 0 if you want, but you can add and subtract water a whole lot easier there. A little T, you put it on either side. You've raked back your rock, give it some food, give it a little bit of mulch or topsoil, depending on what it needs, water it in real well, and then you have your 2 spigots set aside. You can rake your rocks back up on top of that. But you want to be able to get more water and more air to the roots and have that more accessible. So there's a watering chart that we put out with our planting guide, and it's about the bucket size. And if you don't have the bucket that it was planted in, it was in the yard beforehand, the 2 things that you can take from this is take the sprouts a little bit farther away from the trunk and add 1, even if it's got 2. If you haven't touched it and it hasn't had extra water put on it or more water put on it in 3 to 5 years, it's going to need more water. You can cut it back a little bit, go in and take out your dead wood, but you're going to want to add more water. Now, when people plant new stuff, there's a difference in how to get something to survive and how to get something to thrive. And if you keep it in a bucket, it's really easier to see. But oftentimes what happens is we'll plant this and you'll keep with your current watering system, you're keeping that much of the plant moist. And as you saw with this, there's roots all the way at the bottom of the bucket. And you want to put enough water on it to get so that these can continue to grow. If this is the only part you're keeping wet, then the plant might survive, but it's not going to be able to handle any, extreme weathers. It just won't, because it's not healthy enough. It'll look good and it may bloom a little bit, but I use 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the tree, a couple of times a week when it's summertime, as opposed to it going off every day. And how can you tell that is it's pretty easy. You can get moisture meters and they work really good in pots, because you can stick the probe in there and it'll tell you whether or not it needs any water or not. In the deeper stuff and the existing stuff, not so much the conifers that were there before the house was built, but if you planted it or it was planted, you can see where the hole was dug at some point, and you take a piece. It's political season. There's plenty of rebar laying around from the signs, but you get the little one, the sides that's a little bit bigger than a pencil, and it's got ridges on it, and you run it all the way down in the hole next to where the pot was, and until it tees out and hits rock or whatever, and pull it out and take a look at it. And you'll be able to tell. We have veins of clay that go through yards, depending on where you're at. Again, you want to use acid to break that up. But if you have that, then you could be sitting in a bowl. Your plant could be suffering because it's sitting in water. And you'll be able to tell. You pull this piece of rebar out, dusty on top, muddy, nasty on the bottom. Does it stink? Yes. You already got rot. So you got to fix some of that. But you can pull this out. It's just like you're baking. Oh, look, I got a lot of moisture on top and it's just dust on the bottom. Nothing sticks to the rebar. You need to maybe water less frequently and more often. More water less frequently, so it gets down deeper, right? There's on these heads, you'll notice when you're looking at the bag, one is a spray, and you'll see some of the trees when we have a big windstorm and they just blow over and the roots are sticking, you got all of your roots, right? Well, that's from too shallow of watering. The roots are staying on the ground looking for the water. Oh, he gets 20 gallons a week because he's sitting next to my lawn. Well, the water's only this deep because you're watering every day to keep your grass green, and you have a big storm, and that's the sign. You'll see that when you see the trees blow over. The other thing that you'll notice when trees blow over, no roots. It just snaps off. They planted the plant too deep, and maybe they're watering too much. So there's a fungus, and Latin translation means tree killer, but you won't really know that the tree is dead until it is dead. It'll survive. It'll survive as long as it can. But when you plant the tree, you plant it or shrub, you plant it at the depth. The only thing you can plant deeper than the depth it's been growing at are tomatoes. But you plant this at the depth it is. So the hair roots that are here, you can see them when you plant them. It's okay if you put a little mulch on top of them, but when the soil comes up around that, Ken mentioned the cambium layer. There's that material changes from stalk to root. It's a different material, and the roots can handle a little bit of light and the moisture better than the stalk can handle the dirt around it. And once you've planted the thing too deep, and you can do that by putting too much mulch in the hole, but you have to be careful about that. So sometimes it's as easy as just going in and pulling some of the dirt away from the tree or the shrub. You dig the hole the depth of the pot. You dig it wider, not deeper. You dig it too deep and you put your mulch underneath it. That breaks down like it's supposed to. the tree sinks. The dirt collapses in around it. This can happen the day you plant it, or it can happen over time. But that you just want to be, these are ways of checking some of these symptoms. And you'll be able to tell if it's planted too deep, if it's a tree that you've inherited or a shrub you've inherited, but it's struggling, you don't know why. You go in and you start parting around the stalk and see where the roots start. That should be closer to the surface. We had a friend that was struggling with a deodar cedar that he really wanted to make happen. We traded out we checked the moisture, we did all of that stuff. And what he inherited it. It lasted 2 years of him being careful with it almost every day, checking it. The issue was it was planted ball and bag, so it was in burlap, right? And whoever planted it didn't cut the nylon that was holding the burlap. The burlap will completely disintegrate, and it's just like mulch, but it's woven, right? But it started to girdle itself because the tree was growing. We were feeding it, and we just didn't get down to. And when we pulled it out, we saw that, and it was fatter above it and fatter below it, and it just girdled itself. So these little, don't try and do every plant in the yard. Just look at the ones, 1 or 2 that are having a little bit of trouble, and move on to the next. But be aware that planting them too deep or planting them too shallow is as much a problem. So just be careful when you're planting, and be careful when you're looking at things. So watch your water on the outside, get some acid in the soil, get some sand in the soil if they're stressing a little bit, and then plant on when things bloom. So right now everything's exploding because we're having early, but you know, we have the beekeepers of Prescott coming in. And part of my problem is when my peaches were in bloom, I didn't have any bees, and now my cherries are blooming and they're covered. So I don't know what I'm going to get yet until the end of the flowers fall off. But if you plant your yard so that if you enjoy the bees and the butterflies and the hummingbirds, you want to plant your yard accordingly and have things blooming all the time. We don't even have a lantana up here because it wants to be in the summer and blooming in the summer. And again, read the labels on the lantanas. Because you're in a 7, the ones that bloom prolifically all throughout the summer down in Phoenix may or may not be ones that can make it through our winter. You're in a zone 7. So not all lantana are perennial, but there are 2 or 3 species that are hybridized that can make it through the winter. The heath, for example, this is one of the first things to come out, and he should be hard to pick up because of the number of bees. Last year, when spring was a month later, these guys would just be buzzing, and they're wonderful, and they'll bloom for 2, maybe 3 months. And again, this is one that I want to point out to you as well. Potentia, Salvia gregae, heath, germander. There's a few butterfly bushes. They won't bloom as well if you don't aggressively cut them down. And if they've started now, even your Russian sage, there's a great place in your yard for Russian sage. They've started to develop some that don't put out as much runners, but usually in year 2 or 3, that part of your yard is going to be Russian sage. And they will come up, they'll bloom, they'll start to grow on part of the stem. But in the fall, I will shape the stems on these plants, the salvias and stuff like that. Once they go dormant, I'm feeding them phosphate because that's when the roots can work, right, for themselves. And I'm trimming them back so that they don't look so out of control in the yard. I'm just kind of shaping the sticks is what I call it. And give them a good drink even though the sprinklers turned off for the winter. The sprinklers turned off for the winter to preserve the sprinkler lines, not because nothing needs a drink. Everything still needs a drink. If we don't get the snow and everything like that, you got to go out and water by hand. But just because it's chilly outside doesn't mean that things don't need water. They do. So it's cut these things back, trim them. I can't tell you how many potentia I have saved by just cutting them in half, and literally get it down 10 inches off the ground, and it will come roaring back to the plant that you bought. If you save it and, oh, I want it a little bit bigger or whatever, it will actually be smaller if you don't cut it back, and it won't bloom as well. Your butterfly bushes, some of them now, the rush to hybridized is kind of over. So you can read the labels, you can get 2-foot ones, you can get 8-foot ones. And the issue is still them getting too woody and not being prolific enough. So that your 8-footers, the yellow is a huge one, the purple, black knight, those are great big plants. In short order, you'll get great big stalks that will be too woody, and you won't get the amount of new growth off of them because you're proud of how big your butterfly bush is. You've got to cut it in half and go in and take out 1 or 2. Don't do it all at once. Take out 1 or 2 of the biggest stalks. And you want to take out the dead wood, but if you take out 1 or 2 of the biggest stalks, it'll come up from the root or come off from where you cut it and give you all that new growth that's going to give you your new flowers. So your pruning, it becomes very important, especially with roses. Now the roses they flushed out real early this year. I do the same thing with my roses. I will shape the sticks, and then as in the fall and then in the spring, I'll use them being naked, dormant, to go in and take the dead wood out and thin out the stuff in the middle. If you want to leave 2 or 3 tines or whatever, there's a lot of different philosophies to that. I'm not competing in the Rosarian Society. I want some to cut and put in my yard, on the kitchen counter, and I want to be able to enjoy the smell in my yard. So I'm not, and I'm not in the Rosarian Society, but I feed them. They're hardy eaters, and I will take all the dead wood out when I can tell what it is. They're susceptible to, as many of our plants are, to fungus, even though we're light in moisture in the air. You want enough breeze to blow through these. So that is a perfect segue to how you're cutting these things. You see the balls in the yards. A lot of people will just trim things to be a particular shape. And what you're doing is you're setting yourself up, especially for something like a red tip Photonia. You're cutting off all the flowers, and the Rose of Sharon. What a shame. They cut them into a shape. They're cutting off all the flowers that were set up from last year to give you this beautiful spring. Now you'll still get flowers when it heats up, but you'd be amazed at how much of the blooming that you're taking off when you keep it a shape. Plus you've created this environment that shields the inner bark from your wind flow, and you will get rot. It will happen. I had there's 3 7-foot Photonia lining a friend of mine's driveway over there in Pioneer, off of Pioneer, and the center one is just dead. And it happened like Ken said. Oh, he looks a little puny. Is his water broken? Is he rotting because he's getting too much water? Oh no, it's been turned off for the winter. We're just hand watering. Another week later, it's just dead. Now the one next to it's got the white fungus on it because he's cut like a ball. And oh no, we love our yard guy. He does a great job. He's cheap. Okay. And he came by and just cut all the flowers off. So you want to find the structure, let some blow through. If you need something round, that's fine. To each his own. But if you look at some of the plants that are susceptible to spider mite and these other things that love that density, the fungus and the spider mite, those are going to be problematic if you don't thin them out. So cut the dead wood out, whether it's a peach tree or heath or a potentilla. I'm going to go into the fruit care for a second here, because we've talked about how to get the soil, how to plant it, get your acid right, when to give them some phosphate. I will give my fruit trees phosphate in the fall, and I give them a little bit in the spring as it starts to warm up. That should be a 2 or 3 month span. So you're okay with not burning anything. But your warnings on big leafed trees, which fruit trees, peach trees, and stuff like that, they don't want you to take more than 20% off at a time of your leaves. And that's because those are essentially the solar panels. They cause everything to work. Having said that, if you want to bring the tree down to where you can get to the fruit and not have to get on a ladder to get to the fruit and have a bunch of stuff falling in your yard that you can't pick, just chasing it, cut them in after they bloom, after you set fruit, and in the wintertime. When they're dormant, you can take quite a bit off because the normalcy for the tree is based on how many leaves it has on it. And if you cut it when it doesn't have any leaves on it, it is going to function based on the leaves it puts on when the spring comes. Does that make sense? So you're not damaging the current energy flow by taking stuff off during the wintertime. Now, knowing that, when you cut this peach tree, apricot, plum, peach, the new growth that comes from that cut is going to be next year's fruit. So much like we were talking about in the ornamentals, if you just go in and lop everything off, you're cutting off fruit, okay? So what I'll do is I will use the opportunity when I'm thinning the fruit to cut the tree to the size that I want, knowing that I'm going to be getting new growth. So there's 5 peaches on a really narrow branch and it's hanging way down and I'm worried about it. If I don't stake that, which I may do depending on the shape, I might stake it and take a couple of them off the end, just twist off some of the peaches, or I might use that as an opportunity to cut that chunk of peaches off the end, knowing that I'm going to get a bunch of other little branches that will be next year's peaches, and I'll have saved the branch from breaking. So or I will take the center of the tree out and cause everything to come down to a different level. So my peaches, I will actually stake when they, and apples like to do this as well. They'll lay down with all the weight from the fruit. Take that branch. If you were to try and take that branch and bend it, it would probably break. But as nature would have it, as the fruit gets heavier, the tree bends slower and that branch doesn't break unless you get a big windstorm, right? Or too much rain. So you can take that branch, stake it 2 or 3 feet from the tree, take off some of the fruit and let him stay this way. The ancient orchards, if you're privileged enough to be able to walk some of these, there wasn't no machinery to pick this stuff. They were all taken care of. They might have actually had a little step stool built into the trunk so that they could get up as 1 or 2 steps, but nobody was getting on great big ladders. You'll see apples with branches like this that go 6 and 7 foot out that are only 6 or 7 foot off the ground. And they're blunt cut and they're hardy, and all those little bitty branches that come off because they're cut off, put out flowers and put out fruit, but you can walk around with a basket around your waist and pick this fruit. And so it's not this great big shade tree which takes me almost full circle to the fruit. If you have a greenhouse or a west facing window, get a peach tree. It's going to be dormant, naked in the wintertime, so you'll get all the sun in during the time you need it. In the spring, as it starts to warm up, all of his leaves are going to come out and he's going to throw your shade. A nice apple or a peach, allowed it to grow, if it's not a semi-dwarf, they'll get 15, 20 foot tall. And it becomes a really neat structure to throw some shade on the side of the garage, or throw some shade and some color on a window that's facing west that you want to be able to look out and see some flowers in the spring, but you don't want all that sun to come in. Really, really, so you can incorporate fruit into your landscape. I'm as a kind of an interesting admission on my part. I'm on my 3rd house here so far. And this is the first house that I don't have a garden. First house in 40 something years, and I don't have a garden to eat out of. So it was 2 years old when I bought it. I'm dealing with all these issues with the landscape that was planted. The builder was from California. He lived in it. Probably a really good guy. Design wise, it was laid out properly, but the selection of the plants was not. So as I pull up something, I put fruit trees in so that I can have my garden and eat out of my yard, and I can have my flowers. Personally, I don't like to do I love like the crab trees, the crab apples and stuff like that. But if they're in the wrong place and they have the remnant fruit, we'll get white ones in that are sterile, by the way. But the remnant fruit is what brings in the deer and the javelina and stuff. So I didn't want that. I'll pull that crab apple out and give it to a friend because he blooms real pretty, and I'll put a sycamore in there, or I'll put a peach in there that will give me the flowers and some fruit, right? So as I'm doing this, you're working your way into your landscape, and you realize now you've got something that's going to bloom all the time. Besides your annuals and your perennials, the fruit trees and your hedges become part of this blooming cycle in your yard. If you can't handle the pyracantha because it has needles on it or thorns, get the big parney, the big cotoneaster. There's one that gets as big as a pyracantha. He's evergreen. He has almost exactly the same white flowers and red berries as a pyracantha. Beautiful for shaping and for blocking your neighbor's new hot tub or whatever, you know, and it's hardy as can be. But think about when they bloom. Your peach trees, your fruit trees, a good portion of what we have will be self-pollinating, but some of the cherries and stuff like that, and some of the apples you're going to want. We have the plaques out there that will tell you what they self-pollinate with. Be aware of the number of chill hours. So it'll say on your label 700 chill hours. Well, anything below like 200 is probably a apple tree that will set fruit in the desert. That chill hours are the number of hours, not consecutive, but cumulative during the wintertime that is 45 degrees. I think it's 45 degrees or less. And so the higher the chill, oftentimes, the later the bloom. You will also see on the tag early, mid, or late. And that is in reference to when fruit is going to be ready. So you can plan different bloomings on that. If you want to be completely safe, you really have to know where you're at, because we have all these little microclimates. If you want, you can get by with something that's going to, if you're lower, you can get by with something that's going to bloom a little earlier and have something that's going to be a little bit later. The earliest bloom, usually apricot, but some other things will bloom as well. Your fruit is going to be susceptible to a late frost. So like now we're still waiting, we're still holding our breath to see if we're going to get snow on Mother's Day, you know. But I think it was 1920 something where the rodeo was canceled because of snow, 4th of July weekend. So I heard on, you know, almanac, I can now say us old timers calling in to the radio. Okay. But so we don't know, but if you have it early, be aware that you're going to be susceptible to a late frost. I like to get mid freestone and good to eat off the tree. And the late bloomer is going to be susceptible to having green fruit during an early frost. So just be aware of where you're at, because 5,500 feet, 6,000 feet, or 4,000 feet make a huge difference. So be careful about that. And while we're at fruit trees, do read the label. The growers are really careful about how they word what you're buying. You know, oh, great for canning. This peach is a beautiful canning peach. Well, that means it's probably not as sweet as one that is billed as something to eat right off the tree. So, you know, really good for eating right off the tree is what I'm looking for on a peach or a nectarine. Canning is for those that I give the fruit to. So, but some people like that. So just be careful with that. Don't plant stuff too deep. Don't dig your hole too deep. Check your acid. Find a way of making sure if you're going to change your watering, how much water is getting down to the bottom of the hole. You want to make sure, even if it's a tomato, you want to water, especially with your flower beds, you want to water the whole bed every once in a while and not just to be dependent on the little drip. typically I don't put my veggies on a drip anyway. I'm watering, I'm just flooding the bed. And you want to know this. So after you water it and you feel comfortable about it, whether it's a flower bed or a veggie bed, you go and take your little spigot, your little trowel, and dig. And you might find, oh, I'm get to dust really soon, and the water didn't get down deep enough. It's gravity and volume have a huge play on what you're doing. And the only way that you can know whether or not you're doing the proper thing is by testing yourself. So water everything and then go dig up around it a little bit and see how long it takes you to get to dust. If it's on your trees, use a piece of rebar. If it's in a big pot, get yourself a moisture meter so that you can get on a schedule on when you're supposed to water. On my pots and with my stuff in my trees, if I'm doing it with a hose, and I will do this when it's on drip, rather than changing my drip, I'll just go and augment unless it's raining and I need to turn it off. But you have, again, you've all had a sponge underneath the sink that gets all hard, or if you don't do your dishes very often, it's sitting in next to the sink, but you run it underneath the faucet and you got to keep running it under there to get it to hydrate. That's what your soil in your pot is. If you go up, you have a big clay pot, beautiful piece of yard art, and you've got a bunch of flowers in there. The tendency is to go ahead and just water that particular flower. And what you've done is you've left the rest of this dust, and the dust will suck the moisture away from the plant. It's just physics. It's not thinking. So I will come up and you'll put water on it and water will run out of the bottom of the pot. And that's the sponge effect. So I come back and I put a little bit more and you'll find, oh, I can go longer before the water starts coming out. Imagine that. And then I come back a third time. So I'm doing like 3 or 4 pots at a time here. And then I've got a little cycle, a rotation that I've set myself up on. And so I back on the first one and I just flood it. And that will allow all of that stuff, all of that dirt to get wet all the way down to the bottom where the roots are. And that's going to be a thriving plant as opposed to a surviving plant. Yesterday I did a fountain for somebody. And this is not a solicitation. I don't like to do any of the physical stuff anymore. I just like to point and pay, right? But the fountain, we did a few years ago. Disconnected the water and filled it full of really cool dirt and put a bunch of the sedums and stuff in there so that they drape over, and they turned all the water off. Some of them, they lost some of them to selection, like some of the ice plants can't handle our winter and stuff. Really, really pretty though. And they wanted to revive it, put some new plants in and a little bit of extra dirt. Well, they had pulled water lines. And so you have a pot that doesn't have a hole in it. There's no drainage. It's meant to hold water. And so they had these portions of the deepest part of this waterfall. It was a handmade stone feature that stunk from rot because the water just sat there. And so we were excavating the rotten dirt, plugging all the lines, putting new dirt and plants in, and getting them a wand so they can go out and just soak the thing once a week. But that's your other side. A pot without a hole, you're going to rot some things. So just be careful on your creativity. Come and ask us. We can help you figure that out. Buy a masonry bit and drill a hole in it. Who knows? But we'll get creative with that. Any questions? Is there something in particular that you wanted answered when you came here today that I didn't even get around to? Oh, I don't do anybody in the second row. So, no, what? I'm sorry. Yes. Well, that's a good question. What I'll do is first I will buy a round sprinkler, if there's not a drip in that area, say you want to water something that's indigenous, because it gives you a nice rain. The oscillating ones, the wind's going to blow it all around. This is not going to be attractive to anybody. So the birds and stuff like that aren't going to really be affected. It's going to make the tree, this is a true systemic. It's going to be taken up into the system of the tree to make it toxic or not palatable to the bugs. So unattractive to the bugs before they get there, or toxic to the bugs that are there. That's not going to, somebody's going to have to eat a whole lot of that pine tree to be affected by this. This has chicken scat, bat guano, and some other things that are, thank you, that are attractive to the dogs. So, and I have dogs. And one of them's a rat terrier, and he'll dig up anything. More like a lizard terrier right now. But so this does have that smell. And what I will do with this is I'm going around and I buy enough to empty the bags. I don't like to store the stuff. I'll keep some of this, some of the liquids that you can't get rid of everything at once. I'll throw this around the base of the tree, and I'll do this systematically because I want to feed everything in my yard by the end of the week, not by the end of today, because I'll just wear myself out. So I'll take a plastic cup or a pitcher, and I'll walk around and I'll get this section of the yard with my fertilizer, take my wand, put it on rain, and rinse it in. And that's been very effective for me. Now it's in the soil for when it rains or for when my drip goes off, and it's not pellets laying on top of the ground that my dog can pick up. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, you just broadcast it and wait. But even my buddies at it up off a Copper Basin after the pavement ends, they're having to right now go out once a month or so and water these pines. So the day you know you're going to water, take a little cup of this and throw it where you're going to put the water out. Yes, sir.
Here also
8 years, yes.
And wondering if you know of flowering plants that are actually deer persistent.
Yes, I do. The Texas sage. They don't really care for this. And this is something that I do here as well as when I was in Texas. I would come behind. People would just plant salad bars, essentially, for the deer and the javelina. And there's a couple of ways that if you were to talk to somebody beforehand, they might be able to help you. Most of the sages will have enough pungency to the leaf that critters don't like it. And you can tell by just taking a chunk of the leaf and crumbling it up and smelling it. Salvia greyi, rosemary, lavenders. These are all real strong smells, and they don't care for them. The euphorbias, they bleed milk. The common one is the gopher plant. We have a rainbow ascot euphorbia and a miner's merlot. Stunning, evergreen. They're nice and soft, but that milk is quasi-toxic, and they don't like it. But if you, yes, there is. And so I can help you with that on a one-on-one, or you can ask for the list. But yes, there are plenty of things. And there's one that's my favorite is it'll get as big as a red tip Fittonia, and the red tip Fittonia they actually like. It's called a silverberry. And the silverberry's got underside of the leaves are silver when the wind blows. And there's one that's variegated gold, gilted edge silverberry, and there's one that's just dark green. And it'll get 8 or 9 foot tall if you let it. And you can actually keep it, on drip for a year and then just turn it off. But it's super hardy, great plant for up here that deer won't eat. But the first test is a smell. Some really fun low ground covers to soften up corners and stuff like that in the front yard. Use herbs. My favorite is the trailing thyme. And there's another that is a spicy hot oregano. They're evergreen. So after the snow, they just come roaring back. They'll only get like shin high. You can eat them. Nothing else will eat them. They'll bloom during the hot, and they'll bring in the bees and the butterflies and stuff. And it's great little plants. But yeah, I can help you. Pardon me. So a Lady Banks vine, can you plant them now? Yes, you can. At this altitude with our cooler evenings, you can plant anything that is container grown any time of the year. Yeah, I would. They're going to be fertilizer in the mulch because they're container grown, but I always put a small handful of the 744 about halfway up as I'm layering in my dirt. 1/3 mulch to 2/3 native dirt and a little bit of the granular about halfway up, and soak it. So on the planting of a bigger bush, even 1 gallon and up, I have a particular technique, but I will mix my soil 1/3 mulch, 2/3 native soil. If I have leftover mulch, I can use it on the dam so it will break down and get in there over time. But if I put it too much mulch in the hole, then I end up with these air pockets and stuff like this. I get the thing soaking wet, and then I come back a little while later, hence my 3 times of watering, and I will take any attachment off the hose, turn it up really loud, get almost standing water in my new plant, and then I'll take my hose and I'll plunge it down to the bottom of the hole, go around the plant, and you'll see it kind of boil. And that is the sand filling in the air pockets. And you can get an opportunity to kind of make sure your plant is straight at that point. And when that settles, you'll have some puncture marks, and you can just throw some extra sand, native soil or mulch on that. But then you won't have the air pockets in the bottom that will cause you some grief. Well, depends on the size of the bucket. The hallmark, without looking into a specific, is the size of the bucket once, maybe twice a week. So if you're planting a 5 gallon, you want to set your timer so that you're getting 5 gallons at one time, not 2 gallons 3 times to get to 5. Yes, ma'am. Mostly deer and javelina. We're looking at the plants that critters don't like. If a javelina will dig something up because they smell a fresh dirt and they're really looking for grubs, they'll eat some of the roots, but they'll just drag the plant off and leave it. Sometimes if you catch it early enough, you can replant it. Now there are some castor oils and some other things that cause the animals to not like the smell. Most of your critters, javelina especially, will smell before they taste, or they'll taste it and they don't like it. So this is going to be a little out there, all right, but it works. Male human urine will discourage javelina and deer, and it's not a flavor, it is a smell. So when I plant something in an area that's not fenced, I'll pee in a pitcher and I'll pour it around the base, and I'll do that about once every 2 weeks or so until they have changed their path. The reason you have trails in the woods from the animals is because they follow their own scent and they go on the same path. So if you stick something in the middle of the path that they don't like the smell of, they change their direction. I didn't go there. I just know it works. I've had people call me and say, I know where the javelina come into my yard. I have 10 of them or something. This is them talking. I've seen it when I lived up off of Copper Basin. It was a regular thing. And Kevin, I didn't believe you. And I am watching the javelina turn. They're walking in. I just put it right where they were coming into my yard, and they're changing their path. They're standing there confused, and then they're walking off. And they have scent glands, and they rub up against stuff, and they follow their own scent. So, well, don't get in between a javelina. Don't get in between any wild animal and their baby. But Oh, yeah, could be. Yeah. Most animals don't like humans. The two major predators for the human beings are the mountain lions and the bears. They would eat human. And you don't find anybody wanting to repopulate those. They'll repopulate the cute little mouse or the spotted owl, but they don't tend to bring back the mountain lions or the bears. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Cotoneaster parney or parnii. Yes. It's a great plant. Thank you very much. If you didn't get signed up, you won't get the information if that's what you want. I'll be there's another class coming in that's going to be about the bees and pollinators and stuff like that. If you want to stay for that, that's great. But I'll be available to answer questions in between if you got something.
Planted last year and it's starting. But how do I?